Thank you for watching the recording of the very first edition of the AIST Creative HCI Seminar. This is Jun Kato from AIST speaking. Since there was an audio issue at the beginning of the original recording, the audio track of the first 2 minutes was added after the event. The event was held in a hybrid format, on-site venue being the University of Tokyo and online streaming through YouTube Live. We used the shared seminar notes on Google Docs, on which we can take notes collaboratively. During the seminar, the audiences wrote down what they heard and what they thought while listening to the talks. They also asked questions and proposed potential topics to touch in the panel discussion in the talks. The timetable is shown here. After the introduction, we had 2 invited talks, followed by the panel discussion. Before introducing the invited speakers, let me explain about the seminar. It is organized by AIST, which stands for National Institute of Advanced Industrial Science and Technology. There are about 2,300 researchers in 7 diverse research domains working at AIST. And there are 11 research spaces across the country. So it is one of the largest national research institutes in Japan. Among 7 research domains, I am working in the Information Technology and Human Factors domain, or ITH in short. The ITH has an internal research initiative spanning 8 research teams that explores how human-computer interaction would look like or should look like in the future. I'm leading this initiative, and we have a shared vision that people will soon be surrounded by AI-enabled tools and can focus on human-specific tasks, notably creative tasks. Frankly speaking, people might be forced to do so. Foreseeing such AI-enabled society, we strive to develop technologies that help people unleash their creativity. And that's why we named this seminar AIST Creative HCI Seminar. And despite this shared vision, there are so diverse research disciplines within us. So of course there are typical HCI researchers like me developing creativity support tools, studying human-robot interaction, but there are of course other kinds of people who think of this relationship between humans and computers, designing prosthetic legs, inventing novel actuators for telepresence, modeling human behaviors in restaurants, or even standardizing human factors in services. So there are so diverse disciplines, and now we came to the point, what is the HCI? And of course, there are good papers on defining what HCI is, but rather than that, we aim to take an example-based approach to predict and discuss the future directions of HCI. And that's how we started to think of this seminar series to introduce the state-of-the-art in human-computer interaction research by inviting young researchers in the field. And the target audiences include people interested in HCI research, of course, but not necessarily those majoring in HCI, but all, not only HCI, not only computer science, even not in the science or technology department, but all who could potentially jump into this exciting new field. And as for the format, mostly we aim to hold this as a webinar style, but for this very first edition, this will be a hybrid format. And we invited Jonas Frich from Denmark and Zhicong Lu from Hong Kong. And the first edition has the focus on creativity support. So I'm really looking forward to listen to their talks. And we are the organizers. There is this organizing team and advisory board. This is organized by AIST, but also co-organized by Association for Computing Machinery, SIGCHI Japan chapter, which is a Japan local branch of the Association for Computing Machinery. And here we have Kumiyo Nakakoji from Japan ACM SIGCHI chapter chair. So.
Thanks for the introduction, and I'm happy to be here as a chair of Japan ACM SIGCHI chapter to co-organize this event. My name is Kumiyo Nakakoji, and I'm a professor at Future University of Hakodate. And I'm really glad to see that this very first AIST Creative HCI Seminar focuses on creativity support tools. As my personal research history, I've been studying how to create or build or design computational environments to support and amplify humans' creativity or creative processes. So it is really exciting to have these 2 great speakers, and I'd like to congratulate AIST to start this very interesting seminar series, and I'm looking forward to the event. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So now we're switching to the invited talks, and it's my pleasure to introduce Jonas Frich from Department of Digital Design and Information Studies, Aarhus University, Denmark.
All right. So, first of all, thanks to Jun for making this happen, and to AIST, of course, and everyone else involved. It's my first time here in Japan, but definitely not my last. The welcome I've had so far has been heartwarming and extremely nice. So thank you for that. I would like to start my talk with a bit of a short personal history here. And I think this might be sort of my way into this field. And it started from me being creative with computers, being an interaction designer, being a technologist. When I was in high school, I went to the library to borrow these books to learn how to build websites. And later, after graduating my master's, went on to do different types of interaction design projects. So basically trying to be creative myself using computers. At some point, though, I realized that you could also study this phenomena of creativity and being creative with computers. And so I actually transitioned to sort of the academic discipline of studying this phenomenon because I was really fascinated by the fact that you could study sort of creativity as something serious and sort of demystify the creative process. And this was sort of my way into this field of research, this area of research, starting as a practitioner, moving into being interested in sort of understanding it from a scientific point of view. The talk that I'm going to give today has sort of three components to it. There's a brief history of creativity research and HCI, and how the two at some point overlap, or maybe not overlap. Then I have sort of a depiction of the current landscape of creativity support tools. How does this line of research currently look like? What do we see of tendencies and sort of major trends? And then a couple of future predictions or hypotheses that hopefully can serve as a stepping stone to some of the discussions we can have later. So we start with the history of creativity here. More or less, it started around 1950 with J.P. Guilford's presidential address to the American Psychology Association, where he goes out and says that he proposes that we study creativity as something serious because it has serious implications for society. It has a large impact to sort of improve our lives, basically. And this is by many seen as sort of the start of the modern creativity research era. Later, researchers have described sort of the development as three waves of research, which I will briefly go through, where the first wave was very much interested in sort of identifying unique creative talents. Those sort of exceptional creatives, Picasso or Da Vinci, those who were like very unique. But there was a problem still, because even though we would like to study motivation or personality or creativity or intelligence, we cannot really study these phenomena because they are just theoretical constructs. So in this first wave, the researchers needed to find some proxies, basically. How can we measure? Creativity is just a theoretical construct, so we need some sort of tangible measures that we can look at to sort of approximate creativity. And of course, what you could do is you could have some sort of self-report. You could ask people, well, how creative do you feel? Do you consider yourself to be a creative individual? Do you engage in creative behavior? And this, of course, gets you like a report of what they think of themselves. Another approach to identifying creative individuals was to give them some tests and observe behavior instead of relying on self-report. So you could have a test like this, which is the remote associates test. Some of you might be familiar with it. And the very rough theory behind it is that highly creative individuals have stronger associations with different words, for example, that are connected. So the very steep curve is a less creative individual, and the very flat curve is a more creative individual. And so you could administer a test like this to individuals to see whether they were creative or not. And the trick here is, of course, to find that the word that sort of connects the three words left to it. So we have the first line, we have night, we have wrist, we have stop, and the sort of common word here is obviously watch. And so this was one of the sort of early tests to see if people were like able to connect dots that were in sort of a shared space. And we can continue. We have cut it, Swiss, and cake, leading to cheese, I believe, and so on. However, one of the real big disadvantages of this line of creativity assessment is that it relies heavily on sort of verbal or English-speaking skills. So if you have a higher verbal intelligence, you will also score high on these creativity tests. Then another sort of creativity assessment technique in the first wave of creativity research is divergent thinking tests or unusual uses tests. And again, this is a very simple test. You have an object, say a brick, and then the assessed person's task is to come up with as many uses as possible of a brick. So that could be as a paperweight or as a doorstop. You could use it to hammer a nail. It's probably not very good at it, but you could do it. As a weight for diving, so if you scuba dive, for example, and you have a suit on, then you need something to weigh you down. So you could probably use it as well as for that, or maybe even to commit a crime. So you can have like these types of tasks that is tasking the person who is to be tested to come up with as many creative uses of a ordinary object within a limited time frame. These two are, of course, sort of interested in finding highly creative individuals, or assessing individuals' personal creativity. But in the second wave, we see sort of a move away from the focus on exceptional creatives towards viewing creativity as something that is more ordinary, or it's mental or cognitive processes that everyone, to more or less degrees, possesses. So now everyone is creative to some extent, and focuses now more on the creative process. And this obviously gave rise to a myriad of different process models. Some of them you might be familiar with. I think this IDEO one is one of the more famous ones. And obviously also sort of visual depictions of the creative process, where you have sort of a divergent phase and a convergent phase, and sometimes you have it twice, and sometimes you have it once, and sometimes it's an iterative cycle. I think we're all more or less familiar with these types of sort of depictions of the creative process. So this, in this second wave, we also have sort of the acknowledgement, because we are now no longer interested in sort of understanding the exceptional creatives. We are interested also in understanding, okay, how can students, for example, or kids be creative? Or how can you be a creative professional working within a professional domain, being creative, without necessarily being Da Vinci or Marie Curie, for example, right? So we have this continuum that sort of details sort of the different levels of creativity here, where mini C is maybe a child or a young person in school learning something, and can then go on to be a professional creative, be a designer, or maybe a software developer, or a musician, or an artist with formal apprenticeship. And if they then produce creative products, outputs, that historically speaking are deemed highly creative, then they go on to be Pro C. But this sort of adds nuance to what do we mean by creative individuals. Then the second wave is sort of replaced by the third wave, where creativity is now seen as a result of people working together in social and cultural systems and settings. And group-based creativity becomes sort of the focus here. It also relies heavily on multidisciplinary approaches, and I think this resonates better with sort of the type of creativity we have today. This is an example of a highly creative product, and these are just some of the crew that was part of realizing this creative product. So it's no longer sort of this one person doing something creative. It's like a team of multidisciplinary people working towards realizing a highly creative product. And I mean, this is a cultural product, obviously, and this is a scientific product. Both of them are creative. This is the Higgs boson particle, and this is the author list. So they didn't even bother putting in the author list on this paper because it's so long that it went to the appendix, and it's pages upon pages upon pages of researchers who've contributed to this research output here. So in the third wave, we sort of move away from looking at individuals, instead acknowledge that there are groups, and group-based dynamics plays a big role for creativity, which sort of opens up also the field to anthropologists, computer scientists, and people who study those sort of things. But in the third wave of creativity research, the role of sort of the tool that is used to be creative is still heavily underexposed. So this is one of the many models of creativity by Therese Amabile, who is a professor at Harvard. And even in this one, where would we play? So this is like a model that contains all of stuff that can potentially be studied in creativity research. And where would sort of the tool perspective reside here? All the way out to the left, you have the work environment, and somewhere in there, you might have, you know, the piece of software that you use to draw your thing, or the pen you use to draw your sketch or whatever. So this is really not playing a role, or the tool perspective doesn't really play a role in the third wave creativity research, which is mainly dominated by psychologists and cognitive scientists. So first wave, personalities of exceptional creatives. Second wave, cognitive psychology focused on the process. And then the third wave, the socio-cultural approach, where interdisciplinarity comes in, but we still lack this tool focus or tool perspective here. The third wave creativity research also gave rise to sort of the socio-cultural definition of creativity. And some of the things that are obviously important here are that there needs to be realized a product. That product needs to be judged to be novel, but also appropriate or useful or valuable by a suitable, knowledgeable social group. So we now have sort of a more nuanced definition of creativity also. So this is like, if we have the creativity research on a timeline, then of course we can also draw a short timeline of HCI research. And I assume that you're more familiar with this, so I'll do this a lot faster. So HCI, we go from the command line interface to a graphical user interface. This was a major sort of improvement, because we now moved from having to remember stuff to recognizing stuff. I have to remember the command, type it in, get a response, and then move on from there to I can recognize stuff in the user interface instead. And I think this is work by Jonathan Grudin, who has sort of sketched or illustrated this movement in HCI as moving from one person interacting with a computer to multiple people working with each other using computers in more of this sort of CSEW perspective of things here. Finally, HCI has more recently, I would say, sort of tackled more culturally or socially political elements as well. Feminist theories are now playing a role in HCI research, and culture is also sort of an important topic for HCI researchers now, because culture is sort of created in the interaction with the computers that we use to live our everyday life. And so I think this is like the newest brand of HCI research that we see out there. So yes, again, brief history here, understanding human factors in operating computers, to understanding human actors in different work-related domains, to everything like play, cultural productions, learning, whatsoever. Obviously, the history of HCI research is relatively shorter than that of creativity research. Now, if we look somewhere around 2000 in HCI research, something is happening here. And what is happening is that a small group of researchers proposed that we might look at the computer as more than a productivity tool. Here's an example from 1999, I think. The goal of our research is to develop computer systems that support designers' collective creativity. Okay, so now the computer is no longer sort of a tool to be productive, but actually to be creative. And I think this is the following year. Again, opening sentence, a challenge for human-computer interaction researchers and user interface designers is to construct information technologies that support creativity. So around 2000, something is happening. And in 2005, there was a NSF-sponsored report on this. And one of the sort of highlighted quotes from this is that these designing, developing, evaluating creativity support tools that can make us more creative is a research topic with high risk, but potentially also very high payoffs. This makes sense. If you can make a tool that people can use to make other things, this has multiplicative effects. So this is a very important research topic, but it's also very difficult. At the same time, I guess more or less at the same time, something is also happening in society. Many professions are digitalized. Graphics design, for example, starts to use computers to draw things and to do layouts. Architects use 3D models to construct houses and have models of houses. And medical research is also, or natural sciences research is also digitalized. So in many sort of spheres of society, you also have the digitization going on at the same time. So that was sort of the first part of my talk here, the brief history of HCI and the brief history of creativity research. Because after 2000, something really happens within HCI. So this subfield of creativity-related HCI research really takes off. And those of you familiar with HCI research in general knows that there has been also a general increase in the output of HCI researchers, but this is also true relatively speaking. So not just has it grown, it's also grown relatively speaking. And most HCI contribution, again, if you're familiar with the field of HCI, this does not come as a surprise to you. Most contributions within HCI are about supporting creativity with some digital tool. We realize a computer system that can help you be more creative. This is sort of the way that HCI works, more or less. And this is why this term creativity support tools is so important, because this is sort of the mean by which HCI tries to make people more creative. So a creativity support tool, very broadly speaking, is a digital tool that positively influences the user's creativity. That's quite simple. The creativity support tools developed by the HCI community are, however, incredibly diverse. And just to give a few examples here. This is Motif, and it's a super cool smartphone-based video recording and editing application that basically what they've done is they've looked at expert video producers and derived heuristics from them that they then made into interactive guidelines in this video recording app. So if you're a novice and you want to produce high-quality videos using your smartphone, this application sort of lets you follow the heuristics, the rule of thumbs or the guidelines from expert professionals within this field using the tool. So it has like guides for what type of shots you need to have and how long they need to be. To this other creativity support tool, which is called Inspiration Wall, and it's intended to run on large interactive displays, and it leverages speech recognition. So imagine if you're sitting and brainstorming with people. Its goal is to sort of enhance this ongoing collaboration or collaborative ideation session by sort of automatically retrieving and presenting stimuli that is relevant to the conversation here. So say we brainstorm something about a logo for a car manufacturer. This system will pick up what you're talking about and inject to the large screen sort of relevant stimuli based on what you're ideating on. And a final example, this is sort of a mixed initiative machine learning system that helps students give better feedback to students. So I think If you're in sort of the teaching business, you know that this is sometimes a big deal. Giving good feedback is difficult, but it also consumes a lot of time. So they use this machine learning system to help students give more relevant feedback to other students who produced creative work. So those are just some of the examples of this diverse landscape of creativity support research. And some of the work that I have been doing in this field is to sort of try to depict the overall trends, the landscape, if you will, of this developing research field. So basically what we did is we sampled the ACM Digital Library, which is sort of the home for most of this research. And then, of course, we ended up with close to 1,000 papers that we then had to sort of filter down. And what we did is we just cut it off at average citation. So we took the most cited, most impactful papers and reviewed those 221 papers. Based on this, we have a couple of findings. I have a couple of findings that I want to highlight here. There are, of course, many findings in the paper, but I have some of them here because I think they're important for like the future of this line of research. So regarding creativity-related HCI research, there's a really strong focus here on obviously novel digital tools developed by the researchers. Again, this might not come as a surprise if you're familiar with how HCI research works. But it also shows that HCI is very sort of invention-driven. It's pushing the envelope or pushing sort of the boundaries of what's possible all of the time. And to do that, you need to put out novel systems. Secondly, the CSTs or the creativity that is sort of studied by HCI researchers is often done empirically in the lab. So this in the wild research is not really that popular. And finally, there's oftentimes at least, generally speaking, there's no specific definition of creativity. So like the definition I showed you before, this is not really there in most of the research that is published related to creativity in HCI. Now, this might, in my opinion at least, this might be sort of a double-edged sword in the sense that it can perhaps, this lack of definition can maybe hamper transferability between research findings. So what you call creativity might be something else than what I call creativity. And when you say creativity, you might refer to the creative process and I might refer to the creative product. Or when you talk about creativity, you might talk about creative personalities and I might talk about something completely different, right? So this might sort of hamper findings or comparing findings across different contributions. But it might also be that it's due to sort of the activist or innovative nature of HCI, that whatever you're trying to do as an HCI researcher is trying to change what creativity is for that domain using a new system. You design something, you develop something that sort of changes the current existing situation, and thus it doesn't really make sense to sort of have a strict definition of creativity going into that. And I can sort of, those are sort of the two pros and cons in my mind, for why this might be like a double-edged sword, this lack of definition here. And I've argued for sort of more collaboration or more, glancing towards creativity research because they have like this very rigid and rich history of discussing the definitions of creativity. But I'm actually now moving more away from that and thinking that it might not be fruitful for HCI researchers because they are exactly trying to sort of change the current situation. So maybe some food for thought there. So zooming in on the creativity support tools, they generally tend to run on laptops and support ideation or the production of new ideas. An example of such a CST, you've seen some already, but another example is IdeaHound, which is a large-scale collaborative ideation system that integrates the task of defining semantic relationships among ideas into the primary task of idea generation itself, right? So in the lower left screen here, so I think the task here is to come up with April's Fool pranks. So for the 1st of April, sometimes you prank people. And the task is then to come up with different pranks. That's the creative challenge here. And so you can, as a user, you can type in your ideas in the A quadrant here. And if you need inspiration, you can ask for that. So you can get inspiration from other ideas that are out there in the space. But what you can also do is you can see visualized in this F quadrant here, you can see visualized how your ideas relate semantically to other ideas that are already explored in this sort of solution space or problem space. And so there are sort of three mechanisms by which such a CST is trying to support creativity or the creative process. And that is to A, show a diverse set of inspirational ideas, to B, show similar ideas on lookup, so you can decide whether you want similar ideas that are similar to yours, or you want ideas that are far away from yours. And you can again map the visualization here. So a good example of sort of a typical creativity support index, it runs on a laptop or a PC, and it has to do with ideating or coming up with new stuff. Then another point that is sort of quite common to see in creativity support tools is that they are relatively simple in terms of complexity. So, for example, there's an example from 2005 on selective undos. So when you undo, normally you press Command Z or Control C if you're on a Windows, then you undo sequentially. Of course, sometimes the creative process there are steps you don't want to undo, but there are steps you want to undo. This can be done like this can be more easily done when you're writing text, but not as easily if you're drawing bitmap-based drawings here. So this is an example of like a low complexity. It's basically one feature that you could imagine in a whole suite, like if you think about InDesign, for example, or Photoshop. It's like one feature that could go into a larger program here. Or again, another example of sort of a lower complexity or more simple creativity support tool, which also happens to be sort of the rare case of a tangible UI, so something that doesn't run on a screen but actually is out there in the physical world. And which is this positive feedback button for brainstorming. So it's almost like a like button, like a Facebook like button, but it's live. So when you brainstorm, you can sort of show appreciation instantly in the brainstorming session to sort of mitigate evaluation, apprehension, and sort of fear of being judged negatively from your ideas. So again, it does one very simple thing, and that is to show appreciation for an idea that was presented. Quite simple. Then finally, most of the CSTs that we reviewed in our work are sort of high fidelity prototypes. So they exist and they function and they work well. They are implemented, but they are not yet available as sort of as a stable release, or at least they're not released. So a very small percentage of these CSTs are actually available. Only around 13% of all the CSTs that we reviewed are actually available to test and to try and to use by creative practitioners, by other researchers, or by companies who are trying to sort of do something similar. And I think this is a bit of a problem. But I also understand why. Like you have this paper is now accepted, and we can sort of abandon the prototype or abandon the tool that we were building. But it is a bit problematic still. So those would be basically some takeaways from the current landscape of creativity support tools. And I think now I will try to move to future, I call it predictions, we can also call it hypotheses, about where is this line of research headed? What might we see in the future? Basically the description that I just gave, how might that be problematic, or how might it be like a positive or an opportunity for something? Yes, so future predictions, hypotheses, whatever we want to call them. Number one, The focus on tools to support creativity is unique for the HCI community compared to the existing creativity research. This is really something that is quite HCI unique. And I think this is my opinion, my hypothesis, that this is a major opportunity for HCI researchers to A, increase the influence of technology or digitization, as sort of the influence of technology and digitization increases, and B, also because creativity becomes more prominent, becomes sort of the prominent human contribution in the age of AI. And I think this is also some of the motivation behind Jun's, is that, okay, what is the unique thing that humans can contribute in a very automated and AI-supported world? It's creativity, among other things. So I think the tool focus is good, and I think it's one of the sort of major opportunities for HCI researchers to really make a difference. Secondly, novel creativity support tools are often studied in the lab, and they're not publicly available, and few have sort of long-term, in the wild studies published on them. This, for me at least, again, is a missed opportunity, or maybe we can call it a blind spot, for studying how communities and practices co-evolve or co-develop together with the available tools. So we don't really know how a tool is adapted in a community, because it never gets to survive long enough for a community to adopt anything. And I think, especially with sort of the third wave creativity research, it's pretty acknowledged that creativity is a very cultural thing. Like, creative products are created within a culture and judged within a culture. And so it really would make sense to have these type of sort of contributions out there, where we see how a tool impacts and is impacted by a culture or a domain or by a group of people that it's adopted by. So I think this is like the current status, and I think it's a missed opportunity. Point number 3, there are huge differences between the types of novel CSTs that are put out there by HCI researchers and those that are commercially available. So I think this is also obvious from all the examples that I've shown, that these are not Autodesk Fusion or Adobe Photoshop or Logic Pro X, which would be, software tools that creative professionals would use, perhaps. It's vastly different, because it's low complexity, it's one feature, maybe a couple of features, a small system. It's something significantly different. And this might be sort of a natural consequence of the nature of research, that we divide up things into small enough sections that we can manage them and study them and sort of isolate what we are interested in. So it might be what it is. And it might also be that we're just like HCI or sort of technology-driven research works on the frontiers of what's technologically possible. And so this is the interesting part for this group of researchers, not studying how Photoshop does something to the creative process. Or it might be sort of a symptom of misaligned interests, maybe, that we are interested in making a tool, publishing a paper, moving on. Again, this is more of an open question here. Because definitely the CSTs that we see published by HCI researchers are not like these Swiss Army knives, as you can see from Adobe or whatever. So, a short sort of concluding remark here, or a couple of concluding remarks. Creativity, which is the production of something novel and valuable within a social group, is a super interesting and complex phenomenon. It's difficult, but it's also exciting. Secondly, developing creativity support tools is also difficult, but it has potentially really high rewards. It's high risk, it's high reward. And human-computer interaction has or holds a very unique position in developing these technologies that can help sort of unleash human creativity or support human creativity, which is central to well-being and productivity and many other things in the 21st century. So those are my concluding remarks. Mange tak. Thank you very much. And I'm glad to take your questions.
Thank you so much, Jonas.
Thank you.
It's such a great talk. So now we can take questions. We have plenty of time for this, actually. So anybody in the venue can just raise his or her hand and, okay. Now let's start. And also for the remote participants, you can write down the questions in the Google Docs. Let's just try. There is something for each test.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you for the talk. Yeah, I have also working on creativity support 20 years or more. And obviously, the most difficult problem is measurement or evaluation, right?
Yes.
If you develop creativity support tool, then you have to evaluate this person, this user became more creative or not. This is a fundamental problem, but I just want to know your observation after your investigation. What's the standard for the measuring creativity? You listed a couple, right? Remote association test or divergent thinking test. Is that like a common established method that everybody using it, and is it okay, or maybe something else, or it's a chaos, or just want to know?
I think it's a good question, and it's a question that often comes up many times, and I think it even had a section in this NSF report from 2005. How to evaluate this? What are we going to look at? And I think the nature of the CSTs lend themselves to a specific type of evaluation. If you've made a laptop-based system that helps you ideate or come up with many ideas, one of the evaluation parameters will be, for example, the amount of ideas, the difference between, like, are the ideas novel compared to each other, and maybe you even do some sort of rating consensual assessment. You get some experts within a field to sort of assess whether the ideas are novel and useful. But again, that's only because that's the predominant sort of CST put out there. You could see another CST that isn't about making many ideas in a brainstorm, which would obviously require a completely different type of evaluation. So it very much points back to the type of CST produced or published, and that then follows sort of the evaluation. There's also sort of or at least in some of the CST papers, there's still a strong focus on these usability aspects. So acceptance model by the user, can they actually manipulate the system, which, technically speaking, has to do with efficiency or productivity rather than creativity. So maybe there's a bit of a misalignment there also. But thank you for your question. I think it's on.
Oh, thank you very much for your great presentation. My name is Ryotaro Mihara. I'm from Keio University, and I'm an anthropologist. So I'm just kind of coming from the another planet. So, but I'm kind of very amazed to see there is some kind of commonality between those things, because I'm an anthropologist studying about like creative industries, and I was kind of very interested that. That even the HCI cannot define creativity, because that's what the anthropology and sociology of creativity has been kind of debating for decades, and then kind of they really kind of find out that that we can't define. So try not to think about it.
Yes.
So I'm kind of amazed that same thing is happening in your area as well. But I'm just kind of curious about the second point of your prediction about the future of the HCI, the unavailability, and you kind of mentioned about the cultural factor that kind of that distorts or facilitates the the installation of the tool into the actual creative process, because that's also the anthropology of creativity is kind of debating for decades, because my field kind of highlights that creative practice is in a way very conventional. Like creators really stick to what they have been doing and really kind of resistant to the new kind of way. So this kind of convention, cultural things might kind of, be a kind of obstacle in making those tools available to the public or to the kind of commercial practice. So I just wanted to know how your further thoughts on those cultural factors in introducing the tools. Have you come up with any kind of specific examples, or are there any kind of works that is written from the HCI point of view about those kind of cultural?
I think we will hear a talk in a couple of minutes on it, but actually also to comment on your the part about the definition. I think you're completely right that there's been sort of, in other fields, they've had fights about the definition of creativity. I don't think the fights have been that big in HCI. It's just, there's been a relaxed sort of approach to defining creativity. So whereas maybe anthropologists or, social scientists have sort of maybe had arguments for what is the right definition, why are we not being more rigid? Maybe the HCI has just been more relaxed towards it, or agnostic maybe even towards it. So I think it's an interesting point you raise, and I'm aware of these papers saying why don't we still have a good definition of creativity 20 or 40 years after. So thank you for that point as well. And I think actually Zhicong, who's going to present in a bit, has some good examples of like where culture meets and overlaps with tool use, and also how those cultures produce different types of creative products, I guess you can say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Takeshi Okada. I'm studying psychology of creativity, and I enjoyed your talk a lot. But I don't know much about HCI studies. You mentioned that the HCI studies support creative processes such as idea generation and idea maybe evaluation. But how about the tools to support learning? How to develop new ideas and how to evaluate, especially the aspect of evaluation. It's so difficult for novice people to acquire such evaluation system. So how do you support that with HCI?
Thank you for that question. So that's actually quite an interesting. It's an interesting question, because there are many tools that help novices do something. And often it's sort of evaluated then whether the help succeeded in making them, for example, give better critique or do better ideations or whatever. But oftentimes what is missing from those studies is also an assessment of whether they learned something from having used. So if you consider like the CST is maybe like a cane for walking, right? You have a hard time walking or giving good critique, so you use a cane to walk instead. But what they don't evaluate is that if you remove then the CST again, have they learned something from having used it? And I haven't seen that much yet about those type of sort of outcomes or evaluations in the creativity support field. So maybe that's actually an interesting point, that you could have like lasting effects from having used a tool that helps you do something, and then even if you remove the tool, you've learned something from having had that aid for a period of time.
Yeah. And they could learn something using the tools.
Yes. Yeah. True.
So thanks for the talk. So you're talking about, in the first part, you're reviewing the psychology, which is like about the science.
Mm-hmm.
And then Takeo's question was like, how do you evaluate, which is more like an engineering. You know, if the system supports or improves the creativity. But for me, what is interesting is the phenomena emerging between people using tools, and then there is this creative process emerging. So for me, it's like I'm doing a science on top of not only humans, but together with the system and humans.
Yeah.
So maybe it may be called design, but again, is it the research? Is becomes a question. So your last point, that is it like a because there's a huge gap between commercial systems and then the creative support research tools. What do you think of, like, what is missing for us to? I don't think it's a misleading, but I think what is lacking is this way of looking at human-computer togetherness and then emerging creative phenomena. And so I'd like to have your comments on that sort of thing.
So I think I to a great extent agree with you that it's the interesting part is where you have the humans and the computers, or the humans and the tools, and then some sort of new creative approach or creative process emerges. Where it becomes tricky, and I think my third point here is, I don't know, like I wouldn't know where to really focus. Do you know, like, do we focus on making a new tool and then we try to give that to some user and support it for long enough, because it does take time, and we know it takes time for sort of new creative processes or workflows to emerge? Do we wait for that sort of adoption to happen and then we can study things? Or do I say, okay, maybe I can study something that, for example, when DALL-E or these large language models came out, do I just study the stuff in the wild that companies are producing? And then, something happens, people change their workflows, so they change their creative practice. But I don't really know, like, I don't have a good answer to it, but it's something that's really on my mind, whether to be the one initiating the change and putting out the new tool, and then waiting for the new process to emerge, or whether you follow the trends basically, and you see, okay, now DALL-E became a big thing, our graphics designers using DALL-E. But I don't know, I don't really have but it's something that's really on my mind for, like, where to move next. But I would be happy to discuss more if you have some good examples or good ideas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there's one question from remote participant.
Yes.
Thank you for the excellent talk. Thinking of the future development, is it possible to think future in which tool becomes a standalone creative agent, such as a picture drawing hand, dancing robot, or drumming robot? And in such situations, can creativity be considered the same as human creativity?
Yes, I would say would be the short answer. I think the discussion has also been, like, with these image generations, like DALL-E, for example. Of course, it can produce something that you sort of, if you gave it blind to some judges, for example, they could maybe give it a decentable creativity score. But the reason for its novelty is because it is also novel right now. So imagine 10 years from now when this is just a standard, and it's a genre that you're familiar with. So I don't think. I see the question and I understand sort of where it's coming from, but I don't have, like, I'm not a purist, in the sense of I don't have a strict sort of apprehension towards considering something that's creative by an AI agent, for example, to be creative. I think I'm more in sort of the agnostic camp on that one. But thank you for the question to the audience.
And in relation to that, I have a personal question.
Yes.
You mentioned that creativity can be a prominent role of humans in the era of AI. So can you explain about it a bit more? So, like, is it applicable only for professionals or also for novice people?
Yes. So I think one of the things that AI allows us to do is to sort of take shortcuts. Like, you have to write something, you can get an outline from one of these large language models. Or you need to start like if you're designing something, you might be able to generate a mood board by using some AI agents. But that only gets you so far. There's still sort of a curation and a refinement part that is required for it not only to be sort of novel or sort of useful, but really deemed highly novel or highly appropriate, highly useful. So I think the refining part and sort of the curation of material becomes an important sort of creative task for the human, sort of in connection with tools and in connection with artificial intelligence or machine learning or whatever you want to have as a generative part in this equation. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the talk. My name is Maria. I'm a PhD student here. And I wanted to ask a bit about the modality, because you were saying that most, like in the current landscape, most programs are on the computer screen, on the laptop screen, and sort of implying that that there are also opportunities to explore kind of other interfaces that can support creativity.
Yes.
You showed one example with the bottom and so forth, and there's also AR, VR, and there's all kinds of imaginable robotic interactions between humans and computers. I was wondering, like, some of your thoughts about which modalities are more appropriate for creativity, perhaps, or how to support creativity in the kind of physical interaction between the human and the computer.
So there are definitely examples of non-GUI based CSTs. I had one with me today. And some of the stuff that I've seen is exactly what you're also referring to. It's VR, it's AR, it's collaboration with robots as creative partners, where you have you give form to the agent, and by giving form to the agent in something that resembles sort of a human being, maybe, your willingness to collaborate or changes. But I don't really. I think my mind is very directed by what I know is already there. If you understand what I mean, in that sense that I'm aware of the norm right now, and that makes it really difficult for me to sort of envision something that would expand beyond the norm, because I've been submerged in sort of studying the general trends for so long.
Maybe that's too much to ask to predict the future, but
yeah.
I just, maybe it affects creativity a lot. For example, if you're making a 3D model of something, or if you're sculpting something with your hands, you will have a different, from the physical experience, it's different, so you will have a different kind of level of creativity. That was kind of...
And I think also there's when working, for example, in virtual or augmented reality, the sort of this... Sketching, for example, in VR or AR is something that is not as easily supported as sketching a UI, for example, on a piece of paper or on a tablet or something like that. So I think moving towards modalities where you can sketch in these new media forms is important in high enough fidelity that you also get this feedback, creative feedback. You can realize something and you can realize, does this work, or do I need to tweak something? And you get this backtalk almost from the material that you don't really have, or that you already have with GUIs, but you maybe don't have as much with AR, VR, for example, or modeling of 3D pieces. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a really, really nice talk. So you mentioned large language models and how it is difficult to predict the future. So I'm going to ask something about that. Are we not worried, or are you not personally worried that the authentic human creativity will be a thing of the past when we can outsource creativity to these new tools? And then you mentioned that there are always people who are creating these new forms of interaction with the tools, but that's only like a minority of the people. So just like we have lost the ability to remember phone numbers because we have cell phones, do you see it a problem that people might forget how to be creative because you can just ask a language model?
It's actually a really good question. Like, so when you have these divergent and convergent thinkings, you have the ability to sort of generate new response and then sort new response. One sort of potential, like if you look into the future, right, you could see a future where the ability to sort of generate many responses is not, at least you're not in a very good condition to do it. You know, like when you exercise, you become better at things. And if you're not used to doing this, because you can just write a prompt to a large language model, and then you get like a list of different variations. So maybe this is something that is actually gonna, maybe not go away, but that muscle, that cognitive muscle, will have to be trained to sort of maintain it. Like you say with remembering phone numbers, you're not able to remember it anymore. You could probably, if you wanted to or if you needed to, you could do it, but there's no need for it anymore. So I think maybe the convergent thinking part becomes more important because it's about sorting and finding relevance in what is responded to you from a large language model, for example. I think that's like if you want to talk about pitfalls or potential changes to the way that human creativity will change, this might be one of the directions. I don't know if that makes sense, like the sorting of responses versus predicting.
Yeah, of course it makes perfect sense. I think it's a good answer.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. So are there any questions from the remote? Probably not.
No, but I have another personal question.
Okay, please.
Okay. Did you find any geographic effect regarding HCI CST research or publication in HCI community? And if so, do you have any hypothesis behind it?
I actually haven't looked at it. So I don't know. There might be like geographical. What often happens as well is that if you have an author list, for example, you might have 3 authors from Japan and 1 from Germany. Yeah. So it's also difficult how to you could do it, but I never considered. I never considered doing it. I can still do it. We can still do it. It's not something I've looked at, but there might be something there, actually.
Yeah, sounds like a really interesting direction to look into. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So let's clap again for the talks by Jonas. Thank you so much. Wait, is there a question? Sorry. Please go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, may I one more?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, so when you talk about creativity support, today I think you are talking about kind of editor or desktop application kind of thing you mainly. But completely other possibility to support creativity is, how to say, control or affect people, right? For example, maybe some electronic signal or change the light environment. So change the environment or give instruction to the user, you should sleep now, or you should look at this one. So this kind of affecting or controlling human can also promote creativity, right? Is there any previous work on this kind of direction?
I mean, there are stuff. There's, for example, there's one, I think was it a late break work even, from MIT about, the state where you almost fall asleep. And there's like a specific state where you almost fall asleep. And they made like a wristband that tracks when you almost fall asleep to prompt, so you actively think about something that you want to be creative on right before that moment where you fall asleep, to sort of harness that moment in sort of where your mind sort of goes away. And and there's also another, I think the title of the paper is I Smell Creativity, where they try to use different olfactory cues, so like the smell of coffee or the smell of laurels, I think, or the sound of a cafe as like a stimuli to change people's mental state, to then see if they could. I think the task was to write like short stories.
So are they successful and well known, or not yet mainstream?
So I think the problem with that, with the finding there, was that olfactory cues by themselves, so smell, did not do much, but smell combined with other things did a lot of had a bigger impact, if I remember correctly. So if you have the smell of coffee, that doesn't do anything, but if you have the smell of coffee and the sound of a busy cafe, then that does something. Or if you have the smell of, I think it was laurels, but I don't actually remember, some sort of a plant. If you have the smell of that and then the sound of something else, then it does something, but not by itself. So olfactory cues, no, but olfactory cues coupled with something else did something.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there's some work. Yeah, I think I should learn. Thank you.
Thank you. So, are we all okay? Great. So, thanks so much, Jonas, for the inspiring talk. Thanks so much. And, sorry. Now we are switching to the second invited talk.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zhicong Lu from the City University of Hong Kong. And today I'm really honored to be here to share my research about online creative communities and the implications for creativity research in HCI. And before that, I will briefly talk about myself. So I graduated from the from the University of Toronto back in 2020 under the guidance of Professor Daniel Wigdor. And before that, I also had a Master of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies of Information Art and Design in Tsinghua University. And even before that, I had a electronic information science and technology, or electronic engineering background. So I'm more like a very mixed background with both technology and also design, art and design. So this is more like a lot of social media apps that we might use every day, like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, even YouTube can be considered as a social media now. Or even other more specialized apps like Twitch, especially for video gaming live streaming, where streamers live stream about their gameplay experiences, and viewers can watch the gameplay experiences by using their mobile app, for example, or they can even using text to communicate with the communities. And it's not only about communicating with the streamers, but also about communicating with peer viewers. And also Facebook support, like this was Periscope, but later like Twitter and Facebook all support like live streaming live events, or even YouTube, which we are actually currently using this service to live stream live events. And in China, actually, there was a growing trend about kind of like net celebrities live streaming their performance, for example, singing or even dancing. And they actually have a very, very large fan base or dedicated fan base who can for example, give them virtual gifts while they're watching live streaming. And that amount of money can contribute to the income of the streamers. And some streamers even become professional, as shown in this figure. She is a professional live streamer, kind of recruited and trained by an agency company. I think in Japan probably you also have similar agencies, and but probably there are a lot of like idols like in Japan and also in China. But streaming is kind of like decentralize that a little bit, because it's still possible you just live stream yourself and become net celebrity one day if you are lucky enough. But even beyond that, there are other types of live streaming in China, like e-commerce live streaming, and this is specifically about rural people doing e-commerce live streaming, not about, for example, although e-commerce streaming also there are a lot of very organized organizations to sell goods, but here it shows the potential of kind of like leveraging live streaming for social good, because rural people previously they may not have direct access to, for example, potential consumers in the cities. They may need to sell their goods to some intermediaries, and they sell the goods. But now it's more like they can directly promote their local goods, local products through live streaming and gain some incomes. And even more interesting would be some streamers share knowledge, for example, science knowledge, or just this is more like high school physics, so they kind of teach high school physics through live streaming, and even they can gain some money out of it. So my interest in live streaming actually kind of like originated from this kind of live streaming, like sharing knowledge. This is another example, like sharing history stories. He has his full-time job, but through live streaming, he becomes a part-time kind of like history expert, sharing history stories, not only about China's history, but also about the world history to all the viewers, and he almost live streams every day. And as I mentioned, my interest in live streaming originated from a personal connection. So that was the year 2016, and at that year, live streaming started to become more and more popular, especially in China, especially those types of entertainment type of live streaming. And I started to look into the space. Like, I'm very interested in how that really comes into being, and why so many people are using live streaming in China. Like, there's a stats like half of the internet users in China, over half of the internet users in China, were using live streaming apps regularly. So that's really impressive. So I went back home, like my hometown, which is northwestern city in China, in mainland China, and we went to visit a friend of my mom, so an auntie who was in her 50s. And so we talked about research and like my research interest, and I told her I'm kind of like researching live streaming. And she told me, oh, I watched a lot live streaming. So I was like very surprised, like why would an auntie in her 50s watch live streaming? I wonder, was she using live streaming for video games or for those types of like live performance? So I was very surprised. And then she told me she was actually using live streaming for this kind of learning. So she's very interested in like reading aloud poems, like literature. So she's into that, but at my hometown, it's hard to find like mentors who are qualified to teach her, or like a very professional mentor to teach her the skills of like reading aloud the poems. So she actually found a mentor through a live streaming platform, but it's actually a very not famous platform. And she used that platform to learn how to read aloud the poems and engage with the literature. So that really amazed me. And then I almost started a lot to understand like live streaming, and especially like non-gaming, non-entertainment live streaming. So today, I kind of like frame these types of communities as like live streaming and video sharing communities for creativity. And the first part, I will briefly talk about several studies I and some of my co-authors or my students have been doing on a lot of different types of communities for creativity, including leveraging live streaming for promoting intangible cultural heritage, and how the otaku community perceives and engages with virtual YouTubers, and how science knowledge video creators engage viewers, mostly about empirical studies to understand different communities and their users. And the second part will be about how we designed and developed a lot of interactive tools to support these different communities, to meet their needs or to address their challenges, which will include two system work. And the research methods were mostly about like qualitative interview-based study or content analysis, and mixed method study, also combining, for example, quantitative data to understand people, and also involves prototyping interactive systems, design and develop and evaluate these systems. So the first work I'm going to talk about is Kai 2019 best paper, one of the best papers. So it's called I Feel It Is My Responsibility to Streaming and Engaging with Intangible Cultural Heritage Through Live Streaming. So a little bit more about intangible cultural heritage. So they are this intangible cultural heritage practices are traditional social cultural practices within local communities, especially, for example, minor, like ethnic minorities, or some, for example, in some rural areas, there may be some very kind of old traditions, but still very interesting, like cultural traditional practices. And they are mostly passed on by personal exchanges and oral mentoring. For example, the figure shown here is about dough figuring. So dough made of flour, so like flour doughs. So they make use of doughs to make figurines. And there are actually a lot of different intangible cultural heritage across the globe. Like in Europe, there are actually a lot of intangible cultural heritage practices as well, and in Japan as well. And threats like UNESCO, so United Nations, they identified a lot of threats to this intangible cultural heritage, like weakened practice and transmission, cultural globalization, economic pressure, and new products and technologies actually are kind of like a threat to these practices as well. And especially cultural globalization, it is wonderful in many, many ways, but it also threats the cultural heritage because, like, for example, sometimes social media, mass media, and a lot of new forms of entertainment may actually compete for like time and interest from young people. So young people may easily lose interest in traditional cultural heritage, and they may, or maybe they're just like they lack of time to engage with the traditional cultural heritage because of like using Facebook a lot, watching YouTube videos a lot. So traditionally, like UNESCO actually said, like this kind of cultural globalization is a threat to ICH. But this work is kind of like showing it's also possible to leverage live streaming, one type of social media, to even promote intangible cultural heritage. So although it's kind of like a threat, like probably viewers will be more attracted to like entertainment ones, but with this research we show that it's still possible to leverage a lot of features of live streaming to promote intangible cultural heritage. So yeah, I talked a lot, but this is to give you a sense of how live streaming is being used by these streamers to share traditional culture. For example, like this like traditional painting, and the second one, I think you also have it in Japan, right? The guqing, yeah. And the third one was the doll figurine, and the fourth one was like a traditional way of embroidery. So, yeah, I would say these are actually creative communities, or at least like it's about creativity as well. Like it involves creativity activities. So in that specific research, we were really interested in, for example, what motivated these cultural practitioners to leverage live streaming and to share their practices to other people, and how do these streamers interact with and engage viewers to further promote their cultural heritage, and also what benefits, drawbacks, and positive and negative experiences do they have with live streaming. So this study was an interview-based study. As you can see, we studied like TikTok, Douyin, Kuaishou, and Huoshan. So, but TikTok, we focused on the Chinese version because there are more content like this in the Chinese version, and it's kind of like separated from the international version of TikTok. And they are all like mobile video sharing and live streaming platforms in China with a lot of users, like massive number of users. And we actually had a difficulty finding ICH streamers because, for example, sometimes they are from rural areas, and a lot of times they do not understand the value of research. Like when we asked them, they were like, "Oh, I don't know. I don't know we can contribute to your research. I don't think we will be helpful." So a lot of them just turned down us for the interviews. So in the end, we didn't really find a lot of interviewees. Like even if we reached out to like about 80 streamers, and it's like also there are not so many like streamers that we think fit our interest. So yeah, that's a hard process. But even with a small amount of participants, I think this research showed like some very interesting findings. So this life-changing story is the one I liked the most. So the streamer who live streams Chinese embroidery, like a traditional Chinese embroidery. So it's really a life-changing story for her because she was a housewife from rural China. And before she became a live streamer, she was just a like housewife, like raising the children in the home, and also cook for the family, etc. And she didn't have income. And actually, she learned and started to share like Chinese embroidery skills through live streaming. So she learned the skills from another live streamer in China who live streamed these techniques, these skills, and she interacted a lot with that kind of like more authentic expert, and later she started her own live stream, and gradually she started a business like based on the live streaming. Like she will just like do this type of activity, like making the Chinese embroidery, and in the meantime interact with viewers and sometimes sell some materials, like some material kits, like to the viewers who want to also try this activities. And also she sometimes like create some like customizable goods, like based on viewers' requirements during live streaming. So then she can sell those goods to the viewers of interest. So basically it's now she started her own business out of live streaming, and she can earn some extra income through this. So the basic streaming structures are, for example, live video plus simultaneous narration. So they will narrate while they are doing the making. And they can interact with viewers in real time, just like the text here, like on the bottom left, they are text chat sent by the viewers. And sorry, I forgot to mention, like, so we focus more on the mobile part. So Jonas mentioned, like, a lot of creativity support tools are PC based, right? And we think that, like why we saw a lot of this was like the mobile live streaming services, and it's kind of like stability and its rich features are really important for these communities. Like, especially for this housewife, she told me that at their home, actually, they don't have personal computers. Almost the only computing device they have is the mobile phone. So this actually shows that, like, it's really important to consider other different devices beyond just tabletop or desktop, or they even don't use like iPads, like tablets. So like a phone-based thing, mobile phone-based thing is really important for this group. And streamers' motivations, like, although some of them mentioned like making money is the thing, but interestingly, it's not their primary goal, their primary motivation. They mentioned like they are more, they streamed more for the perceived social responsibility for cultural transmission and social impact. They want to leverage live streaming to, for example, make more people aware of the traditional intangible cultural heritage, and to get interest in the activities and to learn those skills. Also, it's interesting, like they regard live streaming as potential opportunities for self-improvement, personal improvement. And they also mentioned live streaming has positive impact on their lives. Like they will feel not alone by being liked by so many viewers. And it's also great for them to encounter different people and get inspirations from different people, especially, for example, people from rural areas. They can be exposed to people from urban areas and they can exchange ideas. And even they mentioned, actually there are a lot of misunderstandings about intangible cultural heritage practices in China. Like a lot of people did not understand, for example, the value of ICH practices. So they may challenge the value or they don't know how to appreciate those skills. So with live streaming, they can actually clear up misunderstandings about ICH practices through directly interacting with those who have questions. So these are actually important for creativity. Like it creates kind of a friendly environment and also interactive environment where they can engage with other users and share their ideas, share their opinions. So and even get more ideas from the audience. So this really shows like kind of like live streaming as a kind of like creativity support tool for those streamers and basically craftsmen. Yeah. And another interesting aspect of ICH live streaming is e-commerce. So a lot of streamers we interviewed run business related to their ICH practices. For example, providing professional online or offline mentoring of the skills, or just sell artifacts like calligraphy or figurines, so they can sell those artifacts during live streams. And e-commerce ensures the sustainability of their ICH practices. This quote shown here is from a male live streamer who shared content about Chinese calligraphy. And he said like he's not really live streaming for making a lot of money out of it. Like it's just enough to cover the expense of tools and materials, and then he can just like kind of like use the money earned through live streaming to make it sustained. Yeah. And the interesting part here is actually the way they sell goods. It's not like a traditional e-commerce business model. Like they have, for example, Taobao is like a e-commerce website, the largest e-commerce website in China, kind of eBay. And actually they don't use this type of platform. They think like it's not suitable for selling ICH related artifacts. One thing is like they thought items sold on this type of like very commercialized, very very mature platforms are mostly manufactured by machines and are cheap. And these two principles do not align with ICH practices. And also they may have limited technological literacy. Like the rural female streamer I mentioned, she said because they don't have like desktop computers, so it's hard for them to, for example, create an online e-commerce shop and to put all the artifacts on the shop and then to sell. So it's like limited technological literacy. So it's interesting that they actually directly leverage WeChat, which is a messaging app and also social media app, to sell. So as you can see here, this is like they can directly transfer money through the WeChat. And also this WeChat moment is like users' social media feeds. So this is from a streamer who shared Chinese calligraphy. So he will share what he had made through this kind of social media feeds, showing all the details of his artifacts. And some viewers who are interested in the goods, the artifacts they created, can just directly ask them through WeChat, and even just send money directly through WeChat. And then they will, for example, use post or carriers to send the artifacts. So it's kind of like interesting that they build some trust based on this. Like, it's like direct personal transaction, financial transaction. Like, because e-commerce normally they have like a mechanism for protecting the both sides, but here it's like they just don't want to use those existing infrastructure, but just use this type of very easy to use, accessible channels, and also one-on-one channel to do this. And it's interesting that they really build trust through this type of live streaming based interaction. Yeah. And we also find like the ecosystem of tools and support they use is like a fragmented technology ecosystem. So they can use live streaming to do a lot of different like types of activities, like just live presentation, or it's like group-based interactions, or even other like invited talks, or even like they can invite some viewers to join like a kind of like a video conferencing and a stream together thing. So a variety of ways to engage viewers. And also we found they also make like short videos, like on TikTok. They make short videos to attract more viewers to join their community. And then they also leverage WeChat for a lot of different activities. As I mentioned, like even e-commerce can be done on WeChat. And a very interesting thing, especially for those artifacts, is like all this type of interaction, like interaction on WeChat, interaction on live streaming, can customize the artifacts. Like the live streamer will make their artifacts customizable based on viewers' feedback, or even just like, for example, the buyer can just directly mention what they want, and streamer will make something in front of the camera to kind of customize the artifacts. So it's really like not only about live streaming, but about this whole ecosystem and fragmented technology ecosystem. And we also found a lot of challenges. One thing is physical and cognitive demands. So most ICH practices require a lot of physical and cognitive skills. As you can imagine, if you're making this doll figurine with both of your hands, it might be very hard to make it already. But so it's hard to keep interacting with viewers, right? Like if you are focused on the crafting. So it's hard to keep interacting with viewers. And a lot of viewers, they quietly watch ICH live streams to avoid interruptions. But the bad thing is this will result in a less active stream. Like viewers may not be actively asking questions or interacting. And the bad thing about less active stream is that the platform recommendation almost always prioritize those live streams with higher engagement in terms of viewer activities, viewer interactions. So here we propose like live streaming platforms should consider other metrics to define user engagement with ICH live streams. Maybe using like users' attention levels or arousal rather than just like number of comments during the live streams. And also, there are unintentional trolling and misunderstandings about ICH. Like, viewers may challenge the value of this intangible cultural heritage. and the degree of craftsmanship, which actually discourage the live streamers a lot. And it's hard to moderate in some sense because maybe it's not about negative comments, like the language is not that negative, it's just like misunderstanding, which will also sometimes raise conflicts, but it's like challenging to moderate. And also, as a lot of creativity support, streamers actually also mentioned it needs external validation, which is expected because it's like a free platform, like everyone can live stream. So some streamers mentioned like some other streamers may not be experts doing the ICH practices, but they just like mimic those famous live streamers and pretend to be experts. And they even live stream to make money. So, and even worse, people may be misled by these fake experts and leaving them with misinformation and bad impressions of ICH, which is another challenge of this type of kind of open platform. And also, lastly, one challenge is about diversity. Like, we see that some ICH practices are underrepresented. It might be because of cultural differences, like those practices may be hard to be understood by people of maybe different cultures. But maybe it's also because of like technological, social, financial, or physical barriers. So, and also we saw that still it's not really engaging young people a lot. Like a lot of viewers in this space, they are kind of like middle-aged or at least like over 30 years old. Like a lot of young people are kind of like not that engaged in this. So future work should look into this type of like even how to engage users of a broader range. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first work, ICH live streaming. And the second work I will talk about virtual YouTuber. But the study was conducted in China, so we interviewed Chinese VTuber communities, and I guess some findings may not be the same for Japanese communities, but yeah, it's interesting to share and maybe to discuss here. Yeah, and yeah, this is.
VTuber 一問一答自己紹介。それじゃあ行くよせーの。お名前は？ジョア。呼び方は？エババエバ。あなたは何系 VTuber？ エヴァだけば一番なんだ。チャームポイントは？我的钻头。突然ですが、モノマネどうぞ。啊，大家好，我是乃琳艾莉哦。双向奔赴。
Pause here. So yeah, this is to give you a sense of. I think this type of introduction, VTuber introduction video, originated from Japan, but it's kind of like also appropriated by VTubers in China, and they are really popular on social media platforms. So in this research, we were really interested in real person live streamers versus virtual YouTubers. So again, we used interview-based studies to understand dedicated viewers in this study. And later, I'm kind of, I have a paper under review of interviewing virtual YouTubers themselves, but this specific work was about dedicated YouTuber viewers. So yeah, we saw a lot of interesting phenomena like unique performative opportunities, like even VTubers can co-stream with real persons. like kind of like in an AR environment, or presenting a physical device or display to co-stream with a real person. Yeah, this is, sorry, yeah, so Kizuna Ai, yeah. And on the left, it's kind of like a Miku in China, like very localized version of Miku. So they are really popular in China as well. And a very interesting part of virtual YouTubers, like especially from viewers' perspective, was that they said daily life content shared by VTubers was really engaging. They really like to hear about daily life content shared by VTubers. So here it's like a little bit like conflicting, because on the one hand, like it's like those Nakakoji are voice actors behind the virtual avatar. So they use this virtual avatar to kind of like disembody their identity with their appearance, because they use the VTuber appearance. But viewers actually, they like to hear about daily life content shared by VTubers. Although it's probably also possible that they, like the voice actors, they actually make up something to pretend to be their daily life content. But still, it's kind of like daily life content is important to build rapport and to make the content seem authentic, at least. And when prompted to reflect on like differences between VTuber and real person streamers, those viewers mentioned like they have different expectations for streamers' behaviors. For example, oh sorry, I accidentally. For example, like the introduction video we just saw, like if imagine it's a real person live streamer, it might be a little like embarrassing, I would say, like, but it's like if it's a virtual avatar and it's like anime style graphics, then viewers probably find it appropriate and acceptable, and even very joyful, right? And also they thought it provides a sense of distance, and they pay more attention to the content and performance of the VTuber rather than appearance. Although appearance is important to attract them as well, but it's just like they can kind of like stay a little bit further and pay more attention to the content and performance. So, and also it's like the personas and identities are dynamic, explicit, and flexible, just as the video we have just saw. Like the personas and identities are constructed through those type of video content. Like they kind of explicitly show what characters the avatar has and what they like. So they can. Oh, sorry. Yeah, it's like, and they can present through multiple channels, like even this kind of figurines. And it's interesting that some viewers, but actually not all viewers, so some viewers, they intentionally maintain the disembodiment between the voice actor and the avatar to maintain perfect impressions. Like they even said they don't want to know who the voice actors really are. And if some people are asking about who are the voice actors, they will actually really, they will become fierce about it. Like they don't really want others to disclose the real identity of voice actors. And some even showed like indifferent indifferent attitudes towards cooperations replacing nakanohitos. Like, not all, okay. I heard like actually some do, but some really showed indifference. Like they don't really think they care, like if cooperations replaced certain voice actors. But when further like ask them questions like, really you don't, are you really this indifferent to voice actors even if they are not fairly treated? And then after some reflections they may say, oh yeah, like fairness for voice actors' labor still matters. But it's just like on the surface level they kind of like showed indifference, which is kind of concerning. But the bright side is like maybe, for example, if the voice actors are not treated fairly, they might still care. So it's not like a totally dark story. Okay. Oh, sorry, I think this slide is wrong, but okay. And the third study I will quickly go through is upcoming CHI 2023 paper. So we started communication strategies and viewer engagements with science knowledge videos on Bilibili, which can also be seen as a kind of like creativity activity because science knowledge videos need some creativity to create. And yeah, we will briefly show some examples, but probably not videos this time. So it's related to science communication, which is the use of appropriate skills, media, and activities, and dialogue to produce the public's personal responses to science, according to Burns et al. And actually in HCI, we're starting to look into science communication using online media, including Reddit, Twitter, YouTube, or Bilibili, as in this work. So it's like science communicators, either scientists or people who have certain level of science knowledge. They share information about science through online media. So on Bilibili, there is even a category of science communication, science knowledge videos that are super popular. Like Bilibili even sell it as their edge competing to other video sharing platforms. And here are some screenshots of like some kind of like well-made science knowledge videos. So we are interested in what communication strategies are used in these videos and how different communication strategies differ in viewer engagement. So first it's a mixed method, so we do both qualitative and quantitative analysis. So we can leverage the video's hashtags to kind of infer its topics, science topics. So we actually use this method to gain like the insights of how many topics scientific topics we should focus on. So we collected like 440,000 science knowledge videos on Bilibili, and we categorized the science topics based on the method. So it's like 11 common scientific topics. And then we randomly sampled the data set to analyze, like in these videos, how the communicators communicate the science knowledge through different strategies. And the taxonomy categorizes strategies into 3 aspects. One is visual, like visible components and styles. One is narrative, so storytelling skills and linguistic perspectives. And also communicator, like factors of the communicators, like their demographics, for example. And yeah, this is the whole taxonomy that we created on their communication strategies. They are from either the literature or some observations of those sampled videos, including like viral styles, community subculture, like Bilibili has their community subculture, and scientific features include like, for example, using visualizations to show something, animations, etc. And narrative include like dramatic questions, like they ask dramatic questions in the video, or using emotional arousal as a strategy, or even the tone of the talk and the orientation, like whether basically the goal of the storytelling and other information. And so we basically categorize all the videos based on this taxonomy, which we can leverage to understand like how the communication strategies influence viewer engagement. So we also collected the comments of those videos and look at like total amount of post-video comments, and also emotional expressions, like whether they use emotional expressions in the text, and also knowledge-related, like scientific knowledge-related discussions. And we actually trained the machine learning model to predict this, a BERT-based model. So we use that to classify all the comments of the sampled videos. Yeah, and we can see actually different scientific topics have different like ratio of different types of comments. Yeah. And for behavioral engagement, it's the total number of comments. We found that like if the video blends with the community culture, like ACGN related content, then there will be more number of comments. So, and it's the correlation is significant. And also the proper use of scientific schematic diagram will increase the number of comments. And also emotional arousal in narratives increase number of comments. And also, if the video is produced by scientists, it's also like they have more comments. And in terms of emotional engagement, like the comments with different emotional, the comments with emotional content, like surprised or happy, joyful, for example. So pure animation style will have more comments like emotional. And also, it's interesting, like formula and mathematical proof will also cause comments to be emotional, probably because they think it's hard. Yeah, and also 3 different types of narrative strategies, like having dramatic question, having emotional arousal, and if the video is made for debunking, there will be more comments that are emotional. And cognitive engagement means comments that are directly related to the scientific knowledge that are shown in the video. So we found that live recording style, like showing full procedures of scientific experiments, actually has negative correlation for cognitive engagement. Like even showing full procedures of scientific experiments within a video will not have more like scientific knowledge related comments for the video. But dramatic question and dramatic question will significantly correlate to more knowledge related discussions in comments. but storytelling, especially unrealistic storytelling and entertaining, have negative correlations to cognitive engagement inferred by comments with knowledge-related comments. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first part. And for the second part, I will briefly talk about 2 systems and tools that I designed and developed for the creative communities I discussed. The first one is StreamSketch, which was published at CSCW 2021. And it's about creative live streams like this, where streamers showcase creative activities within live streams. For example, sketching or even designing different things. And one possible question to ask is like, it's really limited modalities for these communities because design and visual arts, actually, it's important to, for example, show something visually rather than just use text comments to interact. And also, it can be information overloaded, as I mentioned for ICH live streams. You focus on the creative task, and it's hard for viewers and also streamers to look through all this text, chat, right, comments. So the motivation question in this work is, how can we support richer viewer-streamer interactions in creative live streams? And what are their current challenges? And before we designed the tool, we actually reviewed Twitch extensions, as shown in this video. Like they actually support some like very interesting extensions that are built by the streamers, the developers, or even viewers themselves. So they created a lot of very creative Twitch extensions on Twitch to support their needs. But they are quite gamer-centered. Like, yeah, a lot of these extensions really focus on supporting gameplay. But still, we are interested in how Twitch is currently supporting different live streamers, like especially in terms of viewer engagement. So we reviewed existing Twitch extensions designed for viewer engagement. And there are 3 types, like graphic symbols, like the use of predefined graphic symbols, like emotes, GIFs, emoticons, and stickers. So they, for example, overlay those graphic symbols on top of the live stream. And interactive overlays they make certain part of the live video clickable so viewers can interact with certain part of the video, or collaborative interaction space, which enables viewers to collaboratively create art on a separate canvas besides the live stream. So the key dimensions we found through this review is like flexibility is important, and also we have to support expressiveness, but also agency and context are important. And we further interviewed dedicated streamers and viewers on their needs and challenges. So visual input is preferred over text-only chat for engaging viewers. And we need to create a real-time space for sharing ideas and feedback. And understanding the context of viewer comments is hard, and making sense of viewer-contributed content and feedback is important. So with this design findings, we proposed several design goals to support those findings. Yeah, it's like very, they matched each other. So we designed StreamSketch, which enables viewers to draw overlaid on the live stream video, so which will be a visual input. And while they are working on drawing, they can provide annotations and tags for their drawing, so that we can make use of the text they provide to further classify what they have drawn and shown in this word and sketch hybrid cloud. Yeah. So this is the basic idea of stream sketch. So video player and canvas enables viewers to watch and also sketch on the canvas overlaid on the video, and the visualization will provide overview of the information. Yeah, this is kind of a demo video where it's a it's a working prototype and even close to be deployed. But unfortunately, we are not deploying it right now. But yeah, it's like it can work with Twitch and YouTube Live, so viewers can watch the live stream and also draw on the canvas and send their sketches to the server. And like here they provide annotations for their sketches, and we can record the screenshot to preserve the context to help users to understand the drawings. And this is like, they can also just input text overlaid on the canvas. And yeah, for certain sketches, they can also choose to review the screenshot by hover over that small icon, so they can see the context. And also they can fork other viewers' drawings, like by clicking on the plus icon. And by clicking that, they can build on other viewers' drawing and submit their thing. Yeah. And the visualization is just like updating while it's showing, like it's while more viewers contribute their drawings and text. And it's a hybrid word and sketch cloud. And viewers can leverage this word and sketch cloud to filter different comments to make sense of what people are talking about. Yeah. Okay. And lastly, I will briefly talk about Story Chat, which is also an upcoming CHI 2023 paper. So we designed a narrative-based viewer participation tool for live streaming chat rooms. So yeah, typically live streaming chat rooms are crowded, like a lot of viewers will comment, and sometimes there are many really negative comments there. Yeah, sometimes it's like even hate words or racist words. So the motivating question is, can we make live streaming chat rooms less toxic, even without moderating it? Because traditionally, people use, for example, human moderator or automated chat filtering, like keywords-based chat filtering and chatbot. So the motivation is just like, can we go beyond that? And we used a narrative-based approach, which was another paper by James Landis' group and Elizabeth Monet. So they proposed narrative-based interfaces to reflect and motivate physical activity. So the story is like a lock screen on the phone, and based on the tracked information of users, the narrative changes. So we are inspired by this. Like, what if we introduce that narrative-based approach to live streaming? So yeah, this is like a...
We propose Story Chat, a live streaming platform that...
Yeah, this is like kind of like a narrative of a bear watching live stream, and there are ghosts coming to scare it. But with more hearts, with more warm comments, viewers can kind of like, the ghost will be chased away, so the bear is happy. So this is like a very small story, and the idea is like we make that story, visual story, shown on the on the top right corner of the live streaming user interface. So the right part is to live streams, and the top right part is the like narrative. And the basic idea is like
the main character, the bear.
The basic idea is just like when there are negative comments, the story will change to negative, like this, and the weather will be bad, and the ghost will come out. And when there are more positive comments, warm comments, then the storyline will be changed, and there will be hearts showing, and the ghost will be chased away, and the story becomes better, kind of. So that's the basic idea. So the good thing is like increased sense of community and sense of responsibility, and they also found it fun to use, and also they found to be more engaged with the live streaming content, and also the negative comments really describes in our evaluation, and it's like a proactive way of dealing with negative comments. And I think more studies should be done in even considering like a broader range of stories, and also even leveraging other techniques to do this. Well, I think since time is limited, I will just pause here. But thank you very much, and I also want to thank all my co-authors. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the diverse topics, including surrounding this live streaming culture. So let's take questions. So for the venue, you can just raise your hand. We definitely have questions in the Google Docs, right?
Yes, there's 6 questions in Google Docs. Okay. So the first one is regarding the first research about the about the intangible cultural heritage. Is there any bias about the participants? I mean, some people who are willing to convey the status to the researcher has participated. So they naturally tend to feel some social responsibility, which you mentioned as a core insight for the participants. So do you have any comments about it?
So about their motivations?
Yeah, motivations. So they are naturally motivated to take part in your research, and that's why they mentioned social responsibility as a core motivation to also for streaming.
Oh yeah, that's a good question. I imagine the limitation is just like probably sample bias, right? Like those probably feel more socially responsible for transmitting cultural heritage would be probably willing to be interviewed, but those who may not be so like socially motivated may just turn down our invitation for the interviews. Yeah, I guess one limitation is definitely like the sample bias, like also, but I think it's also like the community. For example, some streamers may just not really understand what research is, but not necessarily means they are not socially responsible. I guess that's also true, right? Like it's like, for example, they don't know what HCI research really is. So even if we explain, our goal is to help you probably have better live streaming platforms, but still it's abstract for them, and I guess that's a reason why some really don't want to be interviewed.
Related to your comment, there's one question. You mentioned some people feel they're familiarity about the research, but do you find any hesitation to be contextualized as a research from such participants?
Pardon, to be
contextualized, so being
okay.
part of research.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I think if to run, for example, another round of study and even to engage more streamers or content creators, it's probably better to use more like community-based approach. Like in the research I mentioned, it's more like I directly contacted the like streamers who live stream cultural heritage. So I directly message them and wait for them to reply to me and accept my invitation. But another approach is more like kind of bottom up. I mean, you probably go to, for example, some rural spaces, rural areas in China, and maybe find those, for example, craftsmen, and maybe conduct some, for example, focus groups or contextual inquiry with the real streamers. I think that, and also I guess it's also important to even observe their surroundings, like the areas they live, right? Which we wasn't able to because it was basically based on phone interview. Yeah. So yeah, I agree. Like probably more ethnographical kind of study would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this question is from Kato-san. So, do you have any comment to add?
So yeah, I think I can just skip.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Later in the final.
Yeah, and yeah, some participants, some remote participants find interesting about the fake expert in the study. Yeah, I think fake expert is also common to not only to cultural heritage streamer, but other streamer, and also for some YouTuber or VTuber. So do you have any idea about solution to avoid such discouraging problem?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So yeah, it really made like streamers discouraged, like those people pretend to be experts, they become popular and they earn the money and even more than real experts. Yeah, so we said like probably also those streamers said probably external validity, like external endorsement, which might be a solution. And I think, for example, TikTok and Kuaishou, the platforms I mentioned, they had kind of like a verification of, for example, like intangible cultural heritage inheritors. So they probably have some maybe some people to kind of like check if the content creators are real, like for example inheritors. I mean it's like their title. So they kind of check them and also maybe even work with the government. So I guess it's more like probably policy level, but maybe also it's maybe possible to also use some kind of computational methods to do that. I guess so, but yeah, it's just hard because we don't have really ground truth, right? Yeah. So the platforms, they use human labor, basically. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any comments or questions, or can I continue the questions from remote? Okay, so there's some meta question. Okay. So do you have any difficulties in conveying the context of Bilibili or some Chinese-based live streaming platform in scientific literature? And do you have any tips for overcoming the difficulties?
So sorry, difficulties of
difficulties in conveying the context of Bilibili or Chinese live streaming platforms to, for example, to reviewers or to audiences.
Oh, yeah. That's also a good question. I guess the most difficult part probably would be sometimes certain activities and behaviors are so culturally embedded, and for example, if we write for research papers, it's like we probably have to have a very long background session to really carefully describe a lot of nuanced behaviors and phenomena to the reviewers, basically. So, like, a lot of times reviewers may ask for a lot of details that we think might be obvious. So, I guess so the tips might be, it's important to kind of like provide a very clear background for at least the paper. So even readers who do not have the background knowledge can still understand what it is. And I guess even it's possible to even create some supplementary materials to further depict something, right? And at least reviewers can understand more. Yeah.
So did you create some supplemental video for the your past research, for example, for VTuber ones or cultural heritage one?
Yeah. So we actually created some materials to help reviewers like understand what's going on in the videos. So it's like kind of like video figures for study paper, I guess. Yeah, which I think is important. Otherwise, for example, even sometimes the figures may be hard to understand, right? Like, for example, Western reviewers, like they may even not know, for example, what damaku is. Yeah. Or they may not really know, like, damaku is really engaging, right? And it influences the viewers' engagement, but without showing concrete examples, it's hard to tell them. Yeah.
And how do you convert findings from interviewees into general implications for HCA community or some practitioners? And do you have any know-how about it?
Oh, yeah. That's always the question. So I guess it's like probably we have some kind of small design implications, right? Like when we probably find some really challenging aspects of their practices, so we can propose certain design implications for not only new features, but sometimes it's like probably policy implications for the platforms, or even maybe, for example, community aspect, right? Like maybe the community should do something to, I think, normally like design implications for user interfaces and also policy implications maybe for platforms or even the government, I guess, and also certain implications can be utilized by the community themselves, and they can use some kind of bottom-up approach, I guess. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, do we have some additional questions from floor?
Well, I believe that some of the on-site participants actually wrote questions into this document, including me. So.
Okay.
So probably, I think we are all good, and the time is actually right now on schedule. Yeah. So thank you again for the talk, Zhicong. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you very much for the questions. Yeah, they are great questions.
Thank you. So, thank you. Now we have a break, and we're moving on to the panel discussion. And in this panel, in addition to Jonas and Zhicong, I will join the panel and to provide a bit of context of what brings us here together. I'd like to do a 5-minute speech about myself and also the creativity support research that we are doing at AIST. I'm Jun from AIST, and I have created many creativity support tools, and I have tested it with, within the lab, but also in the wild. So in this context, I'd like to introduce some of them, well, only 2 of them. And first, I will introduce TextLive, which is an integrated design environment for both programmers and designers. And in the second part, I will briefly introduce Griffith, which is a tool for anime production. The first one is TextLive. It was published at CHI 2015, so it's 8 years ago. And at the time, it originally started as a Java application. And so here, the interaction design was already there. Like the designers can tweak the parameters of the videos by changing the values of the sliders, or utilizing these kind of graphical user interfaces. They can interactively edit the lyric videos. And then for the programmers, they can actually use the same environment, but with the different user interface to edit the definition of the algorithms to render these lyric videos. So this is single environment with different layers of the user interfaces for different kinds of people. It started as a research prototype, but then we actually re-implemented as a web service. So now when you access the website, you can open any musical piece on the web with lyrics and choose styles, fine-tune the parameters to interactively alter lyric animations within the web-based web browser. And one interesting aspect that I focus in this project is that each video, lyric video, is not made by a single piece of creativity. It's usually made by social creativity, defined by Fisher. So there is, of course, a video author, but of course that video contains music, which is made by a musician and a lyric writer. And there are programmers who define the algorithms for rendering the videos. So I wanted to dig into this culture where people with different technical background collaborate on creating something. And then we actually deployed it in the wild, and there were many experiments we did. Many of them here done with the professional artists, but there are many more amateur artists who used our tools. And so we did, this kind of, it's pretty much like the commercial product that we kind of do the advertisement in front of the public. We went onto the stage and we kind of, communicate with the artists, amateur artists and professional artists to make it happen in the wild. And so one of these outcomes is like this. So this is live performance by professionals. And as you can see, there is a famous vocal synthesizer character named Miku dancing here. But what we made is creativity support tools TextLive to synthesize and edit the videos on top of her. There are lyrics moving in synchrony with music here. And this is a good example of artwork made by the professionals. But then there are many more amateurs. And this is one of the examples that I was most surprised, because Big Head, the name of the artist, he was originally a musician. He was interested in video authoring, but he didn't know how to do that. And this is a kind of recent outcome of his creativity, that he was a musician, but he gradually learned many things, and he kind of chose what he wanted to use, and he edited this 3D great music video by himself, incorporating the our tools in his own process. So it's really a kind of amateur but professional-looking, really good example of creativity in the wild that we observed. And since then, we could continue the development because they really encouraged us to continue on this research. And so we started with lyric videos that can be created by TextLive. And these days, we released TextLive App API, which is an API for programmers, with which the programmers can, well, in the case of TextLive, they need to implement the algorithm to render graphics. But it couldn't have any interactivity. But in the case of API, the programmers can use their own programming environment. They can use their own tools to create this kind of interactive applications. So in the end, this effort went into CHI publication this year, which will be shown in this year's CHI. The other example is Griffith, which is a web-based tool for authoring Japanese animation storyboards. But I won't touch on the user interface part here. What we did is we first did the literature review. We looked into the storyboarding process abroad. And at Disney, back in 1920s and 30s, this 6-panel storyboard was used. But at the same time, they used this wall-mounted storyboard. And this is how the term storyboard came from. So it's wall-mounted board where there are basically many pictures on top of the board. And people were discussing which kind of storyline they should go on. So this is really a kind of collaborative creativity at the time at Disney. But when it's imported to Japan, I mean, Japan essentially imported the storyboarding culture to create their own animation culture. But then only the 6-panel part was imported, and we don't see these collaborative part anymore. So I thought it's really an interesting, example of cultural comparison, cultural differences that we have. It's not only about the cultures, but also, animation is commercial arts, so there are many more reasons to, make this difference happen. But I see a really interesting part here, so that's why we are designing this collaborative creativity tool for authoring storyboards and beyond. So these are just an example of what I have done in AIST and at my second affiliation, ARCH. And then I came up with the idea that creativity support tools should be studied more in the wild, and there are more interesting cultural aspects. And this actually led me to meet with Jonas last June. And then I contacted Zhicong again several months ago. So we discussed that creativity support tools research has a long history, but there is really research on this creativity in the wild, and we should start exploring this new exciting direction and how to actually study these new interesting topic. And so this is a special interest group, which is kind of special meeting held at ACM CHI this year, titled Special Interest Group on Creativity and Cultures in Computing. So we are really starting to look into this novel aspect in the creativity support in the under the context of creativity support research, and that's what led us here. And it's really my pleasure to have this panel discussion with two of you. So let's just move on to the panel. For the panel, I have two microphones. Do you have any topics that you want to touch first?
I think maybe you should mention I'm on here, that if anyone's going to CHI, then the SIGCHI is on the SIG is on the 24th.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're interested in this and you're going to CHI, it's on the 24th.
Yeah, sorry. I forgot to advertise the timing of that SIG. It's still tentative, but it's already scheduled on the program. Yes. So definitely just drop by if you're attending CHI. So where to start? I really like the discussion of us not having the unified definition of creativity. Mm-hmm. So what's interesting here is that usually when we want to do some research about something or some phenomena, it's really difficult to do the research without the clear definition, because otherwise these research activities might just end up nothing or random thing. But it seems like we are somehow succeeding in supporting the actual creativity. So do you have any opinions or just summarizing what we saw in the...
Yeah, so at least for me, also looking at Zhicong's work, it's clear to me that the type of creativity and the type of creative work that you present is something that is driven by a strong intrinsic motivation to create something, not necessarily in sort of a utilitarian way. Like, it's not with the purpose of making money or designing a new logo or inventing something new, making a new website. What do I know? So and so maybe it would. I'm sure it could fit in sort of the more classical definitions of creativity, but it doesn't as easily, because it would be hard to say, okay, exactly how is this? I mean, it might be novel, but it might also not be novel. And it might, for whom is this cultural heritage useful? Like the product that are produced, for example, this the dolls made of dough, who are they useful for? And is it the production of the doll that's useful, the doll itself, or is it the stream that is produced? Does that make sense? And so I think they are less easily put in this definitory box that sort of, at least I had brought to the stage here. Because it's very much about self-expression almost, or well-being of these creative practitioners.
I think it's related to what Kumiyo pointed out, that these days we are kind of hybrid of the information, information and the actual, actualness.
Like virtual and real.
I really like how Zhicong mentioned the distance between the avatar and herself as a kind of disembodiment. So we can see this disembodiment, but at the same time we can see that these are integrated. And in both cases, the creativity, it's difficult to define where the creativity is actually coming from, because when there is an avatar, probably that avatar is actually kind of making the avatar, making the naka no hito be creative. In this case, the source of the creativity might be this proxy to the world.
But also in the case of Text Alive, you have this multiple sources where inspiration or input to the final creative product comes from. You have the tools to write some code and to so it comes from multiple places in a sense.
Right. That's right. So interesting thing about the video is that it's multimedia and multiple sources, of course, of those information. And actually in the professional domains, creative activities are usually collaborative, because that's the power of being professional, right? As a professional, they can rely on others' professionalness.
And you can have this sort of division of labor where someone will take part of the story writing, and someone will implement the graphics, and so you have this professionalization, if I could speak, of sort of the creative process. Whereas maybe with these, I guess you can call them amateurs to some degree.
Sure, kind of. Though ICH practices, they are like a lot of interviewed streamers. They are experts, truly experts. Though they engage viewers who might be amateurs, and amateurs may learn to be experts in the future. So prospective amateurs, I would say, or prospective experts. So
probably we shouldn't say professionals, but just profession, or kind of
Yeah, but also I think it's you can't, as far as I understand, you cannot attend college or university and learn
to learn this.
Exactly. It's something that is passed down,
right,
or taught sort of mouth to mouth.
Yeah, tacit knowledge.
Tacit knowledge.
Yeah.
Shared within the community of people.
Yeah, local community.
Local community.
Yeah. But I think, I didn't emphasize this. It's also like, although a lot of practices originated locally, it's like with live streaming, they're kind of attracting probably people from far away. So it's like the potential of live streaming is just this, right? Like you spread beyond your physical touch. So
I see. Yeah. It really opens up new opportunities for many people. And that's also happening in especially in the Hatsune culture. There are all these online collaborations happening with this video streaming platform, video sharing platform. So it was really new, I think. And this kind of new phenomena happen every time new medium is invented. So probably here we are kind of sharing the interest on the internet-based cultures. But there are, of course, other physical places, physical embodied interaction, using new devices. Like Jonas, I think you built some device and installed it in the city, right? Cityscape.
But still, like going a bit back to this, the example you also have with people who draw and sketch while streaming blurs the boundary between what is the creative product. So I showed this model of the creative product, the creative process that gives rise to the creative product. But with those examples, what is the creative product? Is it what is drawn on the screen? Is it the sketch or the figure? Or is it the experience or the process of seeing how the artists creates this model? And it's a bit difficult because, sure, in the classical sense, you would look at the drawing and say, or the sketch and say, the sketch is the product, and the process is what is you can see on Twitch. But I assume again that the process is not like it's not like the process that is being shown is also sort of a product in a sense that you show it deliberately how you do this, or maybe you respond to some of the comments, so you alter your process, and thus the process becomes the product in a sense. For these
activities.
Yes. Which makes it difficult again going
to
back
define
to define exactly. Are we talking about the creative product or the process or the person, or what is this?
And so the benefits of doing research in this way, I mean, HCI way, is that we can keep it vague. And do you think I remember he wrote in the paper that we should at least be aware that what we are dealing with.
Yes.
Right?
And I think maybe maybe this is also where I've moderated my opinions in a way, in that classically speaking, and this is what you opened with also, we would like to have unifying definitions of things, so we can agree what we mean when we say this. But maybe that's also when we're dealing with more static phenomena. And now I'm calling creativity, for this matter, a static phenomena. But it might be if it's like human creativity only, but not creativity in a mix with humans and machines, or humans and computers. So like human psychology evolves slower than technology. Like the volatility basically of technology change is faster than human cognition.
I think that's really an important point, because computers are really a good way of inventing new kind of creating something. Right? That's how media art came in.
Yes.
Everybody used computers to do some weird stuff, and then so now that we have this weird medium that can transform to anything, how shall we utilize it? Right? HCI researchers are making new stuff, interfering with existing creative activities, and then observe the changes or how those tools should be designed to make these creative activities better somehow. So one interesting aspect is that I think you mentioned it as an activist approach. I call it like the constructive approach of creativity. Yeah. Here we are kind of, doing something that makes creators do something. So we're impacting the society somehow, either indirectly through papers or directly through the actual deployment in the wild.
Yeah, sure.
I think this is good in the sense that we can study more, but at the same time, probably we might need to pay attention to what we should do, because otherwise, like there is a hype of the AI and content generations and just burning up, discussions about the agency and how we should control these technologies. I can see the connection with the science and technology, STS.
STS,
yeah,
Science
STS,
and
right.
Technology Studies.
Right.
Yeah.
So they're studying how science and technology should be developed. And that's something that I got interested in my bachelor's course, but I gradually went into this computer science field because it seems like computers are everywhere and it's changing our lives anyway. And so, I mean, it's important to think of how it should be and observe what's happening there, but at the same time, because it's changing year by year or on a daily basis, it's really important to actually dive into what's happening and have this knowledge of computer science to kind of not only understand but actively participate in the cycle of this really rapid evolution of the computer-aided creativity support tools.
Yes. And it's also when I think we've talked about this before as well, but those tools that are put out there might be put out there with productivity purposes, but they might end up being creativity supporting tools. So there's also and I think Kumiyo also pointed this out, that you might have an intention with building a piece of software, a system or tool, but then what emerges out of that being put out there might be something completely different. You might consider this a productivity tool, you put it out there, and then it greatly enhances the user's creativity in unanticipated ways. And I think this is also one of the strengths about the way that you work and that AIST work, is that things are actually being put out there for longer periods of time. So that you have the chance to observe the sort of emergent practices that come out of having such tool available for longer times.
Yeah, it might be. Yeah, as a researcher, it might be rare to have this kind of experience of the tools that we made is used in a different way than that I expected, and actually they are good. Well, at some point I thought that TextLive was not expressive enough for for example, professional visual performances. But then people kind of find their new ways of utilizing these tools, because there is one particular case about virtual reality application. So in the VR application, people do a kind of live performance in the VR space, and they need performance that's synchronized with music. And it's really difficult for them to create this kind of synchronized performance, particularly when there are lyrics animating. And I thought, and then they found that TextLive is really a good way to synthesize these kind of videos quickly. So first, I thought I designed it as a creativity support tools, but then for them, it was more like the productivity support tools that then they can focus on the creative part. And it's okay. I mean, it's just okay that this kind of, new ways of utilizing it is discovered by these new kind of creators that we haven't been in touch.
So basically, it frees up mental capacity to focus on on something else.
On something they want to focus on.
Exactly. And so the productivity enhancing part of it becomes, frees up other resources.
Yeah, indirectly supporting the creative part. Actually, we had this similar discussion within AIST because AIST, so there are not, we are a small portion of creativity support researchers there, but people are interested in this direction. So how they can contribute is like they create productivity support thing, like new technologies to support productivity, and then they can argue that they are supporting creative activities through their productive support. And I think this is a really sound argument.
I think so. It's at least difficult to argue that there's like a clear distinction between the two.
Right.
And I know that you could say that we had the example we talked about yesterday, where if you write a software and you autocomplete, and then it just finishes the sentence. Technically speaking, that's like it's a productivity enhancing. Do you know what I mean? You write in a piece of code, then you can tabulate, and then it completes. Or if you use a spreadsheet, you say 1, 2, 3, and then you can autocomplete all the way down to 10. That would be, strictly speaking, that would be like a productivity enhancing feature. But if it frees up resources to do other things, and so it becomes this sort of circular argument, right, of what is the distinction here. So even those features you would consider very strict productivity enhancers can lead to freeing up something.
Right. Shall we start picking topics from the audiences? I mean, I know there are many experts who are like who want to speak up. So,
any comments or topics from here? There's one comment from the Google Docs. Jonas mentioned the lack of research on how ordinary people or community leverages existing tool, and Zhicong provided a good example of such research. So in this context, do you have any comments or recommendations for researchers in Japan?
I'm not sure I'm the one to provide
it's hard
to provide comment or recommendations for that. I think one of the things that I've learned recently is that there's sort of a different culture around like casual creating or being casually creative here in Japan that at least I haven't seen in a lot of other places. In the sense that you are not only creating or being creative if that is your profession, but it can also be your hobby. And part of expressing that hobby is to create, different types of contributions to maybe a small community, maybe a big community. And it's nothing that you would maybe consider this, the pro-C that I showed before. But it's still, small acts of creativity. For self-expression.
Yeah, it makes total sense. And to add that, actually, that's partly why I am here in Japan, like studying these creative cultures. I mean, so I wouldn't like to say it in a definitive way, but Japanese creators tend to create something rather than discussing or criticizing something. So it's really a constructive approach to creating something and then responding by creating something. I mean, so we envision the future that there will be many, many AI-enabled tools that allows us to create something new. And so, and somehow, Japan is a kind of place where that kind of thing is already happening because there are so many amateurs making things, and they're creating something. And so in this case, these creations are kind of common language for them to discuss something implicitly.
Yeah.
And I find it really interesting and intriguing. Yeah, I mean, it has probably good consequences and bad consequences, but I haven't seen much studies on these kind of things, at least in the context of HCI.
No, I agree. I think I agree.
With support of computers.
Yes. It's either professionals or novices who are maybe training on their way to becoming, like a first-year student at a design school or something like that. So I agree that this is like an underexposed
domain
or group of type of
creators. Adding on that, I think actually makers are relevant, right? So I guess I can see parallel, for example, in the US, a lot of makers are really interested in tinkering with 3D printing or even laser cutting.
Wiring, soldering.
I think so. So, it's again kind of like we do not have a unified kind of definition, but definitely there are a lot of relevant practices and phenomena like across the globe, I guess. Like, for example, on Twitch, they do have a lot of like woodwork or also drawing, or like the creative, like Stream Sketch, it was on like actually Twitch. Like we used Twitch live streaming. So it's just like probably it's also a topic in the future to explore, like what like in what degree do they really differ, or are they in what aspects are they similar to each other, right? And more kind of like comparative study, I guess, would be required for us to.
And then it won't be like a study on a single creativity support tool, but rather kind of ecosystem of the tools and creative products that kind of circulate within the community in probably multiple domains.
Yes.
And when there are those kind of studies, we can start comparing them. So I think that's really an interesting direction. Any topic that you want to?
And there's another topic. I noticed that all of you have a background outside of computer science in your careers. So does that affect your interest in this topic?
Perhaps.
But I think we all have sub-majors or an experience as a practitioner.
Yes.
Or in my case, I was even thinking of entering design school or those kind of things instead of the University of Tokyo. So,
personal interest, I guess.
I mean, I think we are computer scientists in some sense, but also I think we are an outlier in the community somehow.
I guess so. I mean, I would not consider myself a computer scientist, even though I've, taken computer science courses and I know how to program and that sort of stuff.
Right.
But for me, it was never about being a computer scientist. It was just like knowing, for example, how to write code was just a means to get to do something, to produce something, to realize ideas or creative solutions to things.
Sure, of course.
So I wanted to make a website back when I was in high school, and you did that with PHP. So I went to the library and borrowed a book on PHP, and this was like the mindset that I've had for many years, is that now I need to do something with microprocessors. So I will get the book on, or this was at the time where internet was a big thing. So you could just find some resources, right, for doing something with microprocessors.
Sure.
So it was always sort of almost like an opportunistic thing for me to I need to do this thing, so I need to learn about this technology so I can do this thing.
Also, I think interest in animation, games, comics is also relevant to this creativity support, right? Like, since, like,
probably that's shared among us, two of us.
Personally, I like video games very much, and even dreamed of like being a animation director or something, like when I was young. So I think, it's kind of like a childhood dream, and it's great that even after training a lot of engineering, we can still touch that direction.
Touching that part of the society through research.
Yes.
I think that's really a good point.
Yeah.
So I'm also enjoying this style of doing research within the community.
Also, regarding games, I think it's interesting that, like, for example, in Asia, we like, especially Japan has so many really well-designed games, but in terms of research on games, I kind of don't see much like representative work. So even like in like maybe South Korea or China, it's also the same, like gaming, research about gaming. But I think gaming is also kind of like a creative activity, right? Kind of. So
I think one of my examples was Zelda as well as...
Zelda, right? Exactly.
Great sort of creative product that took many different types of...
contributions from...
I think there is one thing about this, lack of research, because I think it's important to have a good relationship with the community when we do research. And when it's too close, it's sometimes difficult. That's something that I feel these days. And so, but then there is a question of, okay, then shall we just delegate this research to somebody from foreign regions, or it shouldn't be, I think. So as a community of researchers, we need to somehow overcome these kind of limitations by looking for good ways. I think one way is like asking people with different disciplines, like anthropologists. They know how to get into the community and study them. That's one direction. Like HCI researchers have these skills, but they also have the skills that they're lacking right now. Especially in this social cultural aspect, we need to learn from various domains.
Yes, I think so.
Sounds like a very future-looking conclusion. So actually, we are running out of time.
This is one point that I think the schedule for KAI 2024 tentative schedule was released yesterday, and SIGCCC will be held on Monday, April 24th. Just an announcement.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. So thank you for the panel discussion, and thank you for the engaging audiences, at least on the Google Docs. And it's really my pleasure to host the visit of you two.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's really great that we have this kind of diverse audiences that I'm really aware of. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so of course, this is the first edition of the seminar. We are not ending this seminar series today, but we are kind of continuing this seminar series throughout next year, I think. And we are thinking of holding this monthly, and the next edition, we are planning to invite Amy Pavel from the University of Texas at Austin, and Xing Bruce Liu from UCLA. While the first edition of focus was creativity support, the next focus will be AI-enabled HCI, or the applications of AI technologies in the domain of HCI context. So thank you so much for joining us today, and see you again in April. 4月にまたお会いしましょう. Thank you.